Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on Play Games. My name is Lance, and today I'll teach you how to play Endogenesis. This is a newer game by Hyperlixer. It is a 1 to 5 player game that takes roughly 45 minutes to an hour and a half to play, and is a competitive game, so each player is going to be competing against the other players to be the first to have 3 prisms. And the player that does this will be the winner of the game. So in this video, I'll be teaching you how to play, and there are 3 different modes to this game. You have Standard Mode, which is a 3-player game. You'll have the Chaos Royale mode, which is a 1 to 2 player version, and then there is a tactical version, which will bump it up to 4 to 5 players. So in this video, I'll be covering the standard version, and the other versions just add some additional tweaks to the rules that you'll find in the rulebook. Make sure you have your Klingon text turned on, that way I can update you with any rules corrections I need to make throughout the video. And if you find this video helpful, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as it really does make a big difference. It helps me to continue to grow and produce these videos. If you want to stay up to date on all my videos, also consider hitting that bell so you get notifications anytime I release new content. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you guys how to play. There are 4 different decks of cards that players are going to be interacting with throughout the game. This first deck is the Realm of Knowledge deck, and this is going to be comprised of 2 different types of cards, skill cards and artifact cards. Starting with these skill cards, in the top corner is going to be the skill category, and there are 5 different categories: organic, mythic, entropic, cosmic, and mechanic. On the other side of the card is going to be the energy that card is going to generate when discarded, which you're going to use to pay the cost of other cards, and I'll explain that in a second. Underneath that is going to be the name of the card and its type of skill. So there are 3 different types of skills. You have the active skills, reactive skills, which are used for defense, and an ultimate, which will have the highlighted brackets on the side of the active skill symbol. And inside each of these is going to be a number, which is the cost of that card to activate its ability, which you have to spend in energy. So you're going to discard some cards to be able to trigger abilities on other cards that you have in your area. Underneath that is the card's upgrade level, and based on the number of shards that are underneath the card, that is the bonus that card is going to grant to its basic ability. Moving over to the artifacts, each artifact will have a name, and some of the artifacts are going to generate energy up in the top corner when discarded, and then each artifact is going to have an effect when discarded that you'll trigger. Now, the cards that you discard for artifacts that do not have energy costs in the top, you'll simply read through the effects and resolve the first effect for energy, not resolving any additional effects. So for this one, you'd only generate 1 energy and not worry about any additional effects when discarding it for energy. The Realm of Chaos deck is going to contain 3 different types of cards. The first card is the event cards, and each time one of these comes up, you'll resolve the effects of the event and then discard that card. With distortion cards, they're going to have effects that are going to last until the end condition is triggered. And finally, there'll be monster cards, and there's 2 different types of monsters: regular monsters and legendary monsters. Each one of these will have a number of hit points, the monster's name, and the monster's skills, which each of these skills will have different effects, and I'll cover this a little bit later. And then finally, in the bottom of the card is the rewards for the player that defeats that monster. Realm of Wonder cards are very powerful single-use cards that are very hard to acquire. Currently, the only way players can acquire these cards is by leveling up their health to certain milestones, and I'll cover this a little bit later. Each of these cards is going to list the name of the wonder and its effect when played, and each of these cards is a single-use card, and they're not going to count towards your hand limit of cards as well. And the last set of cards are the class cards, and these are also hard to acquire. First, a player must have the Glyph of Ascension artifact card, as you can see here, and then the player must also meet the class card's requirements for the class that they wish to gain that is still in the class's deck. Once a player gains a class card, it is going to be with that player for the rest of the game and is going to put restrictions on what kind of skills the player can play for the rest of the game. But these cards also grant very powerful abilities to the player that they also have access to for the rest of the game. For setup, first place the main game board out in the middle of the table, then go ahead and grab each one of the decks, starting with the Realm of Wonders deck, shuffle that up and place that out on the board. Next, you can do the same with the class deck, and then go ahead and grab the Realm of Chaos deck, and you're going to separate that into 2 piles. The first pile is going to contain your regular monster cards and the 2 event cards, Age of Wisdom and Crystal Rush, as you guys can see here. From there, then go ahead and shuffle this deck up and randomly draw 5 cards from the top of the deck. The other deck is going to contain the rest of the legendary monsters, any distortions, and the other event cards. And you can go ahead and shuffle this deck up as well. From there, then you'll go ahead and combine these decks again together, shuffling them up. Once they're good and shuffled up, then you're going to add those 5 cards that you took off of it onto the top of that deck. From there, go ahead and select one player to be the starting player, and with my game, I received a coin. I'm not sure if this is a Kickstarter exclusive or not, but otherwise, just choose one player to be the starting player. So I'm going to have my central player be the starting player. Each player is going to receive a quick reference guide and their health track. And make sure that each player has plenty of room, as they're going to be laying out a bunch of cards in that as well. Each player is also going to receive a max health track and a little health gauge that'll mark their current health, and they'll place that on the number 3, as each player will start with 3 health, and then also place out one of each of those next to the number area here. You can also place out the bag that contains all the shards in it and give each player 3 shards to start the game. The rest of the bag will be placed here. You can also place out all the different tokens you'll be using, the prisms and the energy tokens. And for this video, I'll be using a Crystal Fortress pod set. If you'd like to know more about that, there'll be a link in the description below to their website. The final step is the Realm of Knowledge deck. With this deck, go ahead and shuffle it up, and then starting with the first player and proceeding clockwise, you're going to deal out each player cards one at a time. When a player receives a card, they're going to look at it, and if it is a active skills card, then they're going to keep it in their hand. If it is not, then they're going to go ahead and discard that face down in front of them, starting a discard pile. And the other 2 skills you're not going to add are the ultimate and the reactive skills, and those symbols are there, as you can see. So this player is going to discard that card, then the next player will discard that as a reaction. This player over here will keep this in their hands. And this is going to continue going until each player tells the dealer to stop. And the dealer will stop only when the player has 4 cards in their hand, or 4 active skills. Once each player has gotten 4 cards, then the dealer is going to go ahead and gather up all the discarded cards and shuffle those up, and then go ahead and place those on top of the Realm of Knowledge deck. From there, then each player is going to look at their cards that they have in their hands and choose 2 of these active skills to keep. The other 2 will be discarded, and again, those are just going to be placed off to the side for the moment. So I'll say that my player keeps these 2, discarding these. From there, each player is going to be dealt 4 cards from the Realm of Knowledge deck. Finally, these cards that are discarded will be gathered back up, and the Realm of Knowledge deck will be shuffled and placed out on the Realm of Knowledge spot. From here, we're ready to move into player setup. The last step before moving into the game is that each player is going to have an opportunity to customize their character. So as you can see on this diagram here, each player is going to have 4 different slots that they can place their cards. The first 3 slots are only going to be reserved for active skills and reactive skills, and the final spot will be reserved for an ultimate skill, which only can be placed there if the other 3 spots are full of the other 2 types of skills. Underneath each one of these slots, you're also going to see those little dotted spots, and that's where you'll be able to lock shards that will increase the power of each skill that is above them. So let's take a look at an example of this. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my first player here, and I'll take a look at the cards that he has. So as you can see, he has a couple of artifacts. We have 2 active skills, a reactive skill, and an ultimate skill. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by playing my 2 active skills, and I'll also put down my reactive skill. And anytime you have a reactive skill, it's always going to be placed face down so your opponents don't know what it is. I am not going to play my ultimate skill, as it does generate a good amount of energy at this point, and I don't want to have an ultimate skill out there just yet. From there, then you also have a couple of other options with your shards. Again, you can place your shards, locking them underneath each of your skills. You can also discard a shard to increase your maximum health by 1 hit point. It is recommended for beginning players to discard 2 shards to increase their health to 5 to give them a little bit more staying power and access to a Realm of Wonder card, and they can also place 1 shard down on one of their active skills. But this is totally up to you as a player. You can do it any way you want to. I am going to spend those 2 shards to increase my health by 2. So I'll increase it by 2, moving both markers up 2 spaces. And then I also get to gain a Realm of Wonder card. Anytime you do this, you get to draw 2. Look at the cards that you have and choose one of them. So I either have Smite or Diablo. So I'm going to go ahead and take Smite and place this in my hand. Now this does not count against my hand limit, and then discard the other Realm of Wonder card. And then the final shard I will play on my active skill there. Now the reason I was able to draw the Realm of Wonder card is that you have these 3 special slots on your player's health board, the 5, 10, and 15. And each time you place your health on there, so the next time I move it up to 10, then I'll get to draw an Age of Wonder or Realm of Wonder card, and the same for 15 if I get it all the way up there. Each of the first 10 are 1 shard to increase, and the final 5 are 2 shards. You have to discard 2 shards to move it up each spot on the final 5 spots. Once all the players have finished customizing their character, then the last and final step is that in clockwise order, the very last player to go is going to receive 1 extra shard, and this can only be used during their turn, and the second to the last player will get 1 additional Realm of Knowledge card. And again, that can only be used during that player's turn. You cannot spend these during the customization step. From there, we're ready to move into the game. Endogenesis is played over an undefined number of rounds. Each round is broken down into 2 phases, the draw phase and the combat phase. This is going to continue until one of the 2 endgame conditions is met, which is either that one player has 3 prisms, in which case that player will win the game, or 2 players have 2 prisms, at which point then the players will total up their points, and the player that has the most points will be the winner of the game. The first phase in each round is the draw phase, and this will be skipped during the very first round of the game, which will be replaced by a very special reveal step, which again is only going to happen during the very first round of the game. In all other rounds, the draw phase is going to be where the players are going to get to draw cards from the Realm of Knowledge, and this will be dependent upon whether the player has acquired any prisms or not. With players that have not acquired prisms yet, they're going to draw 3 cards and add them to their hands, and then choose one of the cards in their hand to discard. This can either be a card that they just drew, or one of the cards they had prior to that. With any players that have prisms, they're going to draw and keep 2 cards. And again, like I said, this will not happen during the very first round of the game. Instead, you're going to resolve a special reveal step. In order to do this, you're going to reveal the top card of the Realm of Chaos deck, and if it is an event card, you'll resolve the event and then place it in the discard and reveal another card. If it is a distortion, you're going to add it to the distortion track and resolve any effects of it, and this distortion will be in play until its end effects come into play. Now I added this specifically to the deck to show how this works. As you know, when during setup, this could not happen. Initially, at least. And the final card you're going to be looking for, you're going to continue revealing cards until you find a monster. When a monster comes up, you'll add its health to its health track based on its stats. So our monster here has 6 health, and so we'll place his markers on there. Now, during this effect, if there's an initiative on the monster, you will not resolve it, as there is not a starting player just yet, as we haven't moved into player turns. But in all other situations, anytime a monster is killed, you will automatically reveal cards from the Realm of Chaos until a new monster comes out, and then any effects that are in play immediately will be resolved on that monster's card. And I'll cover this more a little bit later. The second phase in the round is the combat phase, and during this phase, the first player will start by taking his turn, and then it'll proceed in a clockwise manner with each player getting to take their turn. After all the players have gotten to take a turn, then the monster will take a turn to finish off the round. During a player's turn, they're going to have a number of different actions they can choose from to perform, including equipping skills, gaining energy, using skills, gaining a class, upgrading, and playing wonder cards. And I'm going to take you through each one of these in more detail to show you how they work. Before I do, there's a couple of key concepts that I'd like to cover. The first is active versus inactive characters. The player who is currently taking their turn is going to be considered the active player, and all other players and the monster are going to be considered inactive. And this is going to be very important for the cards that the players are able to play. Only the active player is going to be able to use active skills, and inactive characters may only use reactive skills if they are the target of incoming hostile skills. Certain wonder cards may also be played in this instance. While players have a choice whether or not to use their reactive skills, monsters with reactive skills will use them by default, and only against the first hostile active skill that affects them during any given turn. The other key concept is with status effects, and I'm going to cover this in more detail a little bit later on, but I did want to mention it here as it is very important how these work. So first off, there are two different status effects you'll be dealing with, which are stun and mark. And during a player's turn, when they stun or mark another player, this will end at the end of the active player's turn. So this is very important as it will not last until it gets back to that player. It will end at the end of their turn. So for example, with my active player being this player here, if he is able to stun this player, at the end of his turn, when he finishes off his turn, that stun effect will end, and then the next player will get to take their turn. This is important for both the players and monsters, as effects will not last only until the end of the active player's turn. Moving into a player's turn. During each player's turn, that player is able to perform a number of different actions, as I listed earlier. They can do this in any order they choose and as many times as they'd like to, as long as they can meet the requirements of the action they wish to perform. So the very first action we're going to look at is equipping skills. This is going to allow a player to play a skill card from their hand out onto their playing area, and there's a couple of rules with this. First off, a player can have a maximum of 3 skills out at any time, which include active and reactive skills, and 1 ultimate skill. And the only way a player is able to play an ultimate skill is if their other 3 slots are already full of active and reactive skills. A player can also choose to play a new skill replacing an old skill. When they do this, they're simply going to take the old skill back into their hand and replace it with a new skill. The other important note with this is that anytime a new skill comes out, it is going to have an equipping delay, which means that you cannot play a skill. The first turn it comes out, it will come out exhausted, so a player will not be able to use it. And they will not be able to use it until their next turn. The one exception to this is reactive skills. They're still going to come out exhausted, so the turn they come out, you cannot use them. But they will untap at the end of your turn, and then you'll be able to use them during opponents' turns if you're targeted as a player. There are 2 different ways a player can gain energy. The first is for a player to choose and discard a card from their hand, gaining the energy that's listed in the upper right-hand corner. For example, if my player chooses to discard dark matter, he would gain 3 energy that he'll add to his area from the general supply. The other option a player has is to play an artifact card, and artifact cards will usually give energy plus additional benefits. For example, if the player plays Ether Sphere, it is going to give him 1 energy, and it's also going to let him draw a card. So I would gain 1 energy, and then I get to draw a card from the Realm of Knowledge deck. The one other important note with this is that you don't want to have too much energy and only calculate energy you're going to use, because at the end of the player's turn, any remaining energy is going to be discarded back to the general supply, so a player is not able to hold on to energy from turn to turn. A player can also spend energy to activate skills that he has out in his playing area. In order to do this, he's going to select one of his active skills that is not exhausted, paying the cost energy that is listed on that skill. So for example, with Siphon, it's going to cost me 3 energy, so I would spend that energy, placing it back in the general supply, and then I would activate the abilities on this skill. So for this one, it would deal 2 damage, and I would get to draw a card if the target is a player. So I would select either a player or a monster as the target and deal 2 damage to them. And at that time, they could react to that, and I'll cover that in a minute. I'm also going to reference my upgrades. If I have any shards upgraded at the bottom of this ability, then I will get to add bonuses to it. If I had 1 shard, it would do 3 damage instead of 2. If I had 3, it would do 4 damage instead of 2. And if I had all 4 shards there, it would do 5 damage. And again, if I target a player, then it would also let me draw a card. And then I would turn this, exhausting it, as each ability can only be used once per round unless a ability or other effect allows you to use it again. Now I can activate other skills that I have by spending energy. I can only activate reactive skills if I'm the target of damage coming my way. Gain a class action is not going to be available to players at the beginning of the game, and will only be available once at least one player has gained a prism. Once this happens, there are a couple of requirements as well. First, a player must have the Glyph of Ascension artifact card in their hands that they wish to spend in order to gain a class, as you can see here. And then they must also meet the requirements of a class. And all the classes are going to require you to have 4 skills equipped. And depending upon the class that you wish to gain, it will be 4 skills of a particular category. So for example, if you wanted to have the class for mechanics, then you must have all 4 skills equipped for mechanics. Once you gain a class, that is going to be yours for the rest of the game, including any restrictions that it provides and any benefits that it has. So for example, again, if we would gain the mechanic class, then you cannot equip any other skills from any other categories for the rest of the game. The upgrade action is going to allow you to spend shards, and you can spend them in two different ways. You can place shards underneath skills that you've acquired, and those will upgrade those skills, but once you place a shard there, it is locked for the rest of the game and cannot be moved unless a card or the game says otherwise. The other way you can spend shards is to increase your maximum health. Each time you discard one shard, you can increase your health by 1 level, up to 10. Once you reach 10, any additional levels are going to require you to discard 2 shards per section. And each time your health reaches the 5, 10, or 15 slot, you also will get to draw a new Wonder card. Most Realm of Wonder cards can only be played during the player's turn unless the card specifically says otherwise. And the last action is Skip Turn. If you end your turn without using a skill or playing a Wonder card, your turn is considered skipped and you get to draw a Realm of Knowledge card into your hand. Once a player has completed any actions that they wish to take, then their turn is going to come to an end, and there's a couple of steps that are involved with this. First off, if the player has any energy remaining, that player will discard that energy back to the general supply. Then if there are any status effects in play on players or monsters, that will also expire at this point. The player can refresh any exhausted cards in their area that they played during this round. And then finally, the player is going to check the number of cards in their hand. And Realm of Wonder cards will not count for this. And each player has a maximum hand size of 7 cards. So if the player has 7 or more than 7 cards in their hand besides Realm of Wonder cards, then they must discard down to 7 cards. From there, then it'll move over in clockwise order to the next player to take their turn. Now that I've showed you how the actions work in a player's turn, I also want to talk about reaction skills, as that is going to be very important for non-active characters. So a reaction skill can be used at any time in response to a hostile skill by a player or monster, including another reaction skill, as long as its conditions are satisfied. In order to do this, let's go ahead and say, for example, that my player here wished to play Siphon. So he does this and he targets the player over here. So at this point, the player does have a reactive skill that he could activate if he wants to, and you are allowed to look at your reactive skills at any time to decide whether or not you want to use them. If he does, he's going to flip the skill over, and then he must pay the cost of that skill. So with Warp, it's going to cost 3, so he's going to look at his cards and choose cards to discard to get that energy that he needs. So he's going to play the Glyph of Ascension that's going to give him 3 energy, which will trigger Warp. So from there, as you can see on Warp, it says that you're going to redirect the effects of the skill against you towards the monster instead. And killing a monster in this way is going to grant you its rewards. So with 2 damage coming over to him, he's going to redirect that onto the monster, and the monster will take that 2 damage instead. Now, if the monster had a reaction, then it would also trigger, and it would resolve the effects of that. Now that our player has finished resolving his effects, the reactive card is going to be taken back into his hand. He's going to look through his hand and choose another reaction card, which can also be the same reaction, and place it again face down in front of him. Now there are also a couple other important limitations with this. Each player may only use 1 reaction skill against the effects of 1 incoming hostile skill that affects them. Reaction skills cannot be played against events, distortions, or wonders. And any additional defense that was not used against the skill that is targeting the player cannot carry over. So once a reactive skill is done, any leftover stuff is wasted. And unless otherwise stated, reactive skills do not protect against status effects. So even if a skill did damage and status effects, these status effects would still take effect on the player that was targeted. Death is going to have a big impact in the game, both for the players and monsters, and I want to go into some more detail about this. So first off, with the players, anytime a player dies, they're going to suffer a penalty, and that is going to be dependent upon the number of prisms that player has. For players that have no prisms, they're going to have to discard a Realm of Knowledge card from their hands, and then their next turn will begin as normal and they'll restore their health to full at that point. For players that have 1 prism, they're going to have to remain dead, so they're going to skip their next combat phase. They will still get to resolve the draw phase, drawing 2 cards back into their hand, and their hand is still limited by that 7 card maximum. With players that have 2 prisms, they're going to suffer both of these penalties, so they're both going to have to discard a card and skip their next combat phase. And the one other important note with this that can be a little tricky is that you always are going to have to resolve all effects of the card that is played and any additional cards that affect that before you determine if a player dies, because a card can do damage and then heal a player. So in that way, the player doesn't actually die from those effects. And it's going to be the player that does the killing blow, whether that is a reaction or another effect, to the player that is going to receive the rewards for that. And there's a number of rewards with this. If you kill a monster, you're going to receive the rewards that are listed on the monster's card under the rewards section. And if you're able to kill a player, the player that does that killing blow will receive a shard for a reward for doing that. Now, moving over to monsters, when a monster dies, the game is going to be suspended and nobody can do anything. And then you'll reveal Realm of Chaos cards until a new monster comes out. So you'll resolve any effects that come out, any distortions that come out, and then when a monster comes out, you'll reset its health based on its health gauge, and then resolve any effects that come into play for that point. And I'll cover this a little bit more when I cover monsters. And the other important thing that I want to go into some more detail on is status effects. And there are 3 different status effects: stun, mark, and true strike. So for stun, a stunned character may not perform any actions until the status ends. For inactive characters, this means that they cannot play reaction skills or wonder cards in response to anything that comes at them. For the acting player, this means that their turn is going to end instantly and they cannot perform any additional actions. Now, the one important note with this is that a stun is applied at the end of a skill's usage. So characters are still able to respond and react to the skill until the stun comes into play, which is again resolved at the end of that skill that causes it. So for example, if you look at this card here, the Neither Hex, it's going to deal 2 damage, and if at least 1 damage connects, the target is going to be stunned. So a player can still respond by playing a reaction card to this, but if 1 point of damage gets through, then that character is going to be stunned after the fact. The next one we're going to look at is Mark. And so with this, the Mark effect is going to add some bonuses to additional effects that benefit from a marked skill. The one other important note with this one is that a skill that both marks and provides a mark bonus does not apply to the skill initially. So the skill will mark, and then the next skill that you play that has a marked bonus will come into play at that point. So you cannot benefit and per se double tap on a skill that does both. And the final status effect is True Strike. So skills with this effect cannot be responded to by reaction skills. There are going to be certain wonder cards that have a reactive ability that can be used against these, but normal cards cannot be used against True Strike. Now this is going to have a different effect on monsters. With monsters, their reaction skills are automatic, and so while they cannot respond to a skill that has a True Strike, it doesn't negate the fact that they will still get to respond to another skill that targets them later in the turn without True Strike. So you cannot use a skill with True Strike to bypass having a monster activate. It'll still activate if you play another skill to do damage to him after the True Strike skill. Endogenesis is going to end in 2 different ways. If a player is able to get 3 prisms, then that player is going to win the game. Otherwise, if 2 players are able to get 2 prisms, then they're going to compare their scores by adding up 2 different factors. First, each player is going to calculate their health and get points for it. So whatever a player's maximum health is, they'll receive points for that, and they'll get 1 point for each health point that they have up to 10, and 2 points for each health point above that. So if our player has 13 health, he would receive 10 points, plus an additional 2, 4, 6 points for the 13. So you'd have 16 points in health. And then each player is also going to receive 1 point for each shard that they've collected. And those are both shards that are equipped to their different skills and any shards that they have not used yet. The player that has the most points in that situation is going to be the winner out of those 2 players. Once all the players have had an opportunity to take a turn, then the final part of the combat phase is that the monster will activate and resolve any effects that it has. So there are 5 different monster skills: active, reaction, initiative, death cry, and mercy. And I'm going to take you through each one of these to explain how they work. So first off, with an active skill, when a monster's turn starts, they're going to resolve any of those skills that are on there. So with the monster here, it's going to have you draw a card and deal damage to all players equal to the card's energy value. With skill cards, this is very easy and is simply just the value that is in the upper right-hand corner. With artifact cards, such as the hyperdrive, you're only going to count the energy that it generates first and not any additional effects. So as you can see, you would gain 1 energy, so that is the amount of damage that it would do to each player. Next, with the monsters, you have the initiative. So with the initiative, when a monster comes out is the only time that that is going to be resolved. Reaction is going to take place for each player. The first time that player attacks the monster during the round, a reaction is going to take place and you'll resolve any effects on that. Death Cry is going to happen when the monster is killed, and this will happen only after all the other skills have been resolved. And then you would simply resolve the Death Cry and then you'll proceed with drawing a new monster. The final type of status effect is going to be Mercy. So with Mercy, this is for really difficult monsters, and if no player has maximum health equal to or more than that amount stated, then the monster is going to leave. It will return to the bottom of the Realm of Chaos deck, and you will simply draw a new monster instead. So for example, with our monster here, he does have Mercy, so if everybody's health is below 8, then he will leave. Once you've resolved the effects of a monster's turn, then you immediately get to start a new round with the draw phase. Now that I've taken you through the rules, I want to take you through a quick turn real quick to show you how the combat phase works with all the different things put together. So again, I'm going to start off with my first player here to take his turn, and so he's going to choose to do some different things. So I'm going to start off by spending that dark matter to get 3 energy, and then I will go ahead and spend that right away to activate Siphon to deal 2 damage, and I'm going to go ahead and target the monster. The monster does not have a reaction, so it won't react to that, and it's going to deal it 2 damage, so it's going to bring it down to 2. And then that will be exhausted. And I'm going to go ahead and spend the Ether Sphere to also gain a energy, and I get to draw a card. And I'm going to also spend Echo right away to gain 2 more energy from that. And I will spend 2 of those to activate my bow. And then this one is going to deal 2 damage and mark a target. So I'm going to again target the monster, and that will finish him off, removing the health, and then I'll gain the rewards that are listed. So again, I will get 2 shards that I get to use, and I get to draw a card. From here, then the monster is going to be discarded, and a new one will be revealed. So it happens to be another monster, so this one has 4 health, so I'll set my gauges. And it does have an initiative, so this is going to happen right away, and it's going to deal 1 damage to all players. Now each player can choose to do a reaction to it if that player wants to. So my player doesn't have a reaction that's going to help him, so he will take 1 damage. This player over here will take a damage, and my player over here is also going to choose to take a damage. From there, then my player's turn will continue now that a monster is out. So I'm going to go ahead and spend 1 of those shards to increase that one. And I will spend 1 shard to increase my health. So my max health is going to move up 1 point, and then my standing health will move up 1 as well. I will, at this point, I think I'm going to end my turn. So any shards that I have or any energy I have remaining is going to be discarded. And there are no effects out currently, and my hand size, I don't have more than 7 cards. So then at this point, then it would move over to the next player, and I also unexhaust all of my abilities. So then it would move over to the next player to take their turn. And again, like I said, this is going to continue with each player, and then finally the monster will get to go and activate and handle any effects that it has as well. Well, I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my videos and leave me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it, and I take into account everything you guys say to make the best possible videos. And if you find these videos helpful, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really does make a big difference, helps me to continue to grow and produce these videos. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.